Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I ask my supplementary questions, I want to correct.
I thought you were going to ask in Kiswahili the way Rueda was. But proceed.
Unfortunately, I look forward to a day when the Somali language, which is being the language of many, many millions of Kenyans, will be an official language, and then I would have done better. Mr. Speaker, I want to correct two issues the minister pronounced himself on. One, I appreciate his generosity that he wants to gazette Bute Malawa Forest. This has been gazetted 4 years ago. All I requested him is to operationalize the 19,000 hectares of land generously given to Kenya Forest Service. So it is already gazetted. I wrote to you for its operationalization, Bwana CS. One other statement he made remarks in regard to one scientist around, an environmentalist. Speaking in front of you is equally an environmentalist on matters at hand, Mr. Speaker. So you should not think that there's only one environmentalist in the House. And going straight to the issue, the climate financing issue. Mr. Speaker, there is a paradox globally that climate financing is not purposed to stop climatic abuse, but rather the rich nations want to abuse the climate so that they become richer and the poor ones continue suffering. So all that they are trying to do under the concept of climate change is to cut out a balance between adaptation and mitigation. That's all they are doing about climate change, to strike a balance so that those who are endowed can at least give the wealth they have sinfully acquired, to use the right word, in abusing the environment, to the vulnerable ones, the poor third world states. That is what climate change in a layman way means, Mr. Speaker. And in so doing, the structure is as complex as climate change itself. It is hard to understand this issue of carbon credit. Hard, very complex. It is driven by the same selfish, rich abusers, Mr. Speaker. Now the issue. For us to come to the bottom of climate change financing, we know that the rangelands are the biggest sequester of carbon. It is a scientific concept. And where are the rangelands? Where you come from, Mr. Speaker? Where I come from, the northern Kenya, what we call Asals. This is the biggest sequester of carbon that is a nuisance to the ozone and climate change. What structures are there? What mechanisms are there? And the most affected, the most vulnerable to climate change is, unfortunately, again, the pastoralists. The sequester, the vulnerable in equal measure. So how far is carbon financing established to make sure that those who are most affected and those who are to be the sequester of this bad element is at the core of it, is something I would wish to hear from the minister. Then, for us to structure climate financing, Mr. Speaker, there is a big data and knowledge gap. Data and knowledge gap. If you have big data and knowledge gap, it goes without saying that you can't come up with adaptation mechanisms appropriate to the risks. And consequently, what will arise? We will have a fragmented financing architecture too, that our climate financing will be fragmented. The architecture will not be smooth and well-oriented. So what are we doing about data? How authentic is our climate change data? How knowledgeable are pastoralists and those who are most affected? That is my first supplementary question, Mr. Speaker, and if you will allow me a bit of latitude to go into the first, because you stopped us, on issues of our environmental health concerning pollution on rivers, the Nairobi River. It is true, the Cabinet Secretary answered well on the matter, that maintaining a good standard of environmental health, it's a multi-sectoral, multi-pronged issue. It's not a one-off issue. It cuts across many ministries, many actors, and many livelihoods. But it is true what he said, it comes down to behavioral issue. We have informal settlements in Nairobi. How do we behave? The culture of disposing waste. But of concern to me, how is our sewerage system, is it being improved to make sure that effluents, raw effluents, human defecants do not go into our aquatic ecosystem, into our waters? And that tells me...
Honorable Saney, you've had a very long leeway. Ask one question now. You should be in the Committee on Environment and you should be giving all these ideas at the appropriate places.
Mr. Wanjala, the speaker addressed me and I am obliged to hear him. We don't have two speakers. My question in a nutshell, all that is happening in Nairobi is going downstream to downstream communities. Tana River, Indian Ocean. It's not only an impact on our terrestrial ecosystem. What are we doing on these effects on our aquatic ecosystem?
The minister will be at liberty to say that he was prepared for this question, or maybe give another day to answer some of these questions. They're very technical, and ample prior preparations is always important.